If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. I'm Melanie Hill, writer, editor, and poet, and I help writers find solutions to their story problems so that they can finish their novels. And Sylvester Stallone, if you're listening, you might want to reach out.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a literary editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
For today's What Went Wrong episode, Valerie chose Staying Alive. This 1983 film was directed by Sylvester Stallone from a screenplay by Sylvester Stallone and Norman Wexler. Now, of course, there will be spoilers. I don't think there's spoilers, but we do talk about the movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Simply go to the show's landing page and scroll to the bottom. It's that simple. Now, I'm ready. I'm ready to understand. Why? Why, Valerie?
We are punch drunk.
Oh my God. Dance. Fire. Wow.
Oh my God, Melanie. Oh, Melanie. All right. Well, I guess the best place for me to start is to explain myself and why I chose this particular movie. Well, I was thinking about In the Cold Light of Day and how it got 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I thought, I wonder if there's, anything else that's gotten lower than 4%. And there is. If you Google it, there's a whole big long list of movies that actually have gotten 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And Staying Alive is one of them. And since I have not seen the movie before and will never watch it again, so help me God, I thought I would give it a whirl. And Melanie, I'm sorry that you had to watch it, but this is the What Went Wrong episode. So what can I say? All right. As a reminder, when I study a story of any kind, whether it's a film, a novel, whatever, I start by just watching the movie or just reading the book without editing, without analyzing. I'm just a moviegoer. I'm just a reader. And the reason that I do this is because when you're analyzing a story, you need to do it from the position of someone who knows everything. You need to know the end, right? You need to know the whole story. That said, I've done so many of these movies now, and I've done so many books that even on a first pass, it's kind of impossible for me not to notice the craft. And for me, from my perspective, that is not a problem at all. That I find that really interesting. And I'm particularly delighted when a story is so well crafted that I get caught up in it and I get lost in it and I don't notice the craft, right? I don't see the magic. I don't know how the trick is done. I mean, those are really fun days. That is not the case with Staying Alive. All right. I am particularly interested. So when I'm watching a movie, I'm paying attention not to the craft, but to my reaction. I'm looking for things like, am I checking the time? Am I wondering how much time is left? Did I pick up my phone? Did I walk out of the room and say, oh yeah, don't bother pausing the movie? Or was I riveted? Was I leaning forward? If it's a novel, do I feel like picking it back up again and reading it? Am I wondering about the characters between readings, like when I'm driving the car or brushing my teeth or something? This is all the kind of stuff I'm really curious about. I also try to eliminate non-story related issues. So, for example, in preparing for the podcast, I do my best not to watch a movie when I'm already tired, because that's not fair to the filmmakers, right? I might not be interested in the movie because I'm exhausted. That's not their fault. And if I don't have time to watch the movie all in one sitting, I try not to do it, because again, that's not the filmmaker's fault, right? That's me. I only have a half an hour right now, so I got to turn the movie off in 25 minutes and go do the next thing. So that's how I approach it. All right. So with Staying Alive, I watched it with my daughter Avery, who loves performance stories, right? Like, these are crowd pleasers. She especially loves arts related performance stories because she is an actor and she took dancing lessons for 15 years. She's a singer. Like, this is how we roll. We're an arts family. So on the surface, this movie is right up her alley. So in addition to paying attention to my own reaction, I was also paying attention to hers. So here's what happened. We both vocalized out loud that we did not like Tony. Avery said he was a jerk. I'll be honest, my language was a little more colorful than that. We both got tired of all the dancing montages. Even worse than getting tired of them, by the end of the movie, they were annoying us. And again, she is a dancer, and I love dance. And also, the movie did not hold our attention. It didn't hold her attention. It did not hold my attention. In fact, at one point, Avery got up and walked out of the room for about 20 minutes and came back and said, "What did I miss?" I said, "Not a darn thing." Again, my language is a little more comfortable, a little more colorful than that. So when someone who isn't in the business, right, someone who's not a writer, when they watch a movie or they read a book, these are the types of reactions that they will have. And if you don't believe me, ask the people in your life who aren't writers and they don't care how a story is written. They actively do not want to know. When they go to see a movie, ask them what they thought of it. Hear the kinds of feedback that you get. When they've read a book, ask them what they thought of it and hear how they phrase their thoughts, good or bad. If someone doesn't like a movie or doesn't like a book, chances are they won't be able to pinpoint exactly why. Like, I remember a friend of mine, the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. When she was recommending it to me, she said, just read up to book, whatever it was, 3 maybe in the series, I can't remember. And I asked her why, and she said the best way she could frame it was, it felt to her like the author had forgotten who her characters were. Right? So that's a really interesting bit of feedback. And if I had the time, I would dive into that series and find out exactly what she meant. But I don't care enough to do that, to be honest. And really, a viewer doesn't have, and a reader, they don't have to be able to pinpoint it. That's not our job. That's not their job, I should say. That's our job, right? It's our job to know these things. We are the creators. We are the craftspeople. If we are going to avoid making these same mistakes, we need to understand how they happened so we can learn from them. And that's the point of the What Went Wrong episode. It's not just to poke fun. In fact, really, I genuinely don't ever want to poke fun, because they got a movie made and I didn't get a movie made. It's very much, the intention here is very much to learn from what has gone before so that we can improve our own craft. So I want to take these 3 points now that I just mentioned, take them one by one and explain from a craft point of view why we felt this way. All right, so the first one was, we don't like Tony. Now, that is how the audience will express their feelings, right? They express it in terms of they like the character or they don't like the character. But as the creators, as the writers, we have to understand that they're not really talking about likability. The main character does not have to be likable. Michael Corleone in The Godfather is not a likable character. When a viewer or a reader says they don't like a character, what they mean is that they do not empathize with the character. And Green Lantern, which we did back in season 13, the one with Ryan Reynolds, it had exactly the same issue. Now, why do we not empathize with Tony? It's because he doesn't respect Jackie. He is not an honorable character. It's not even that he cheats on her per se. Believe it or not, that sounds like a really out there statement. But if Jackie was really mean and nasty and being in a relationship with her was not in his best interest, and he strayed, that wouldn't bother us as much, right? Because Tony, as the protagonist, is our stand-in in the story. That's what the protagonist does. That is the job of the protagonist, to be the reader or the viewer's avatar in the story. Empathy means there is something about that character that we recognize in the character that is like us, or that we think to ourselves, if we were that person in that situation, we would behave that same way. That is not how any of us believe we would behave. If we're in a loving relationship with someone who supports us, who has our back at all times, who is patient with us, who loves us even though we are highly flawed, right? This is what Jackie is doing for Tony. We don't want to say, oh yeah, we would totally cheat on that person and disregard her and stand her up over and over again. Yeah, no. Even if we did do that in real life, we don't want to admit that, right? This is not a person we want to say we relate to, right? Jackie is a victim here. She is innocent. She's kind, she's patient, she's tolerant, she's doing nothing wrong, and yet he treats her like total dirt. And what happens then is we, as the viewing audience, empathize with Jackie. Even if you're a man, you're going to empathize with Jackie because you recognize that what Tony is doing is wrong. He's being an arsehole. And Jackie is a supporting character. She is not the lead. She is not the protagonist. Yet, she is more interesting than Tony. She is more complex. She is more nuanced. Her behavior, tolerating his disrespect, standing up for herself, and then taking him back. This behavior is evidence that there's a lot more going on with her beneath the surface, right? There's all sorts of social stuff going on. By contrast, there is nothing going on beneath the surface with Tony. Nothing. He is exactly who he appears to be. There is a scene where he goes back to visit his mom, and I think this is the filmmaker's attempt to show us that Tony is having a change of heart, that he is maturing some way, that he is becoming aware that he's an arsehole, and he is trying to grow up a little bit. I think they are trying to tell us, or trying to convince us, that there is something going on beneath the surface with Tony. The problem is that this guy has zero depth of character. Like, in terms of personality, this guy is flatlined. He is all surface. Everything with Tony is superficial. And worse, his mother gives him a pass. She gives him a pass for being disrespectful to her. And so this whole scene, this big apology from Tony, it falls apart. It rings hollow. In fact, she applauds his disrespect and his attitude BS. Okay, now a little sidebar here, because honestly, I can feel it boiling up here, Melanie, and if I don't get this out of my system, I might explode. All right. So when Avery and I sat down to watch this, Avery came to it cold. Okay, she hadn't done any research on it. She didn't know anything about anything. Now, obviously, in the beginning, it says, directed by Sylvester Stallone. So that was when she knew that he was involved in the movie, when it comes up in the credits. And she said, Mom, this movie is just like Rocky, but with dancing. Right? When Tony is at Laura's dressing room and he refuses to take no for an answer, like, again, she said, this is like Rocky, right? When Adrian is saying, no, I'm not interested, Rocky ignores her. Like, this was upsetting to Avery, and I'm so happy that it was upsetting to her, because when I was her age, we were just so inundated with this stuff that I don't think I even really noticed it or was consciously aware of it. But Avery, in her generation, she said this when we watched Rocky when she was a teenager. She said it again when we were watching this movie. She said, like, no means no. How hard is that to understand? Right? Even the whole persona of Tony reminded her of Rocky Balboa, and the way John Travolta was crafting the character, because again, she's an actor, so she's really looking at the portrayal and how Travolta was creating this character. She said that was very much the same as the way Stallone presented Rocky. And maybe that's the way Travolta was directed to do it. Stallone is the director. Who knows? And then when we see Tony in his costume for the big dance number, right, the core event, she said, Mommy looks like Rambo. And he does. He does. He looks like Rambo. And I don't know if Rambo was before or after this, but he looks like Rambo. So that was really interesting. Because to me, this signals that, Stallone artistically has a very limited palette. So the other thing, yeah, and Sly, feel free to call me. I'm happy to help you. Free of charge. God, I hope he doesn't
We
see
are
me.
so going to get in trouble with that.
All right. The other thing that really, really got under my skin with this movie is the way women are portrayed. Oh my God. So back in season 10, Melanie spent the whole season studying female protagonists and characters. If you have not listened to those episodes, please do yourself a favor and go back and listen, because it was eye-opening, and it is an area that, I mean, Melanie, we should write a whole book about this. We really should, because it is so important. We have to circle back and get to this, because there's these sorts of stories out there that are just complete BS, and I've had enough, and I'm 54 and I'm not taking it anymore. So
Me
there.
too. I agree. Let's do it. We'll do it.
All right. So in Staying Alive, we've got three main female characters, right? Jackie, Laura, and Tony's mom, Mrs. Monero. Jackie, this is the woman that Tony wants to spend his life with, right? And Mrs. Monero, Tony's mom, they both allow Tony to treat them like dirt. Both of them. Tony apologizes to his mom, like I said earlier, and she tells him not to bother apologizing. She gives him a pass. She praises his disrespect, because she says it's that attitude that got him out of that world that he was in and got him into something bigger and better. I don't know what was so bigger and better than his life, because he's in this crappy little apartment. He's in Manhattan, but he's kind of working dive jobs and not doing very well. Anyway, whatever. Jackie also gives him a pass, right? She stands up for herself temporarily, but all he has to do is bat his eyelashes at her, and she just caves instantly. Like, I don't see what's so great about Tony. I mean, he's not all that in a bag of chips. Now, Laura is totally different than these other two women. She does not allow Tony to disrespect her. And how is she portrayed? She is portrayed as a slut, as a vixen, and as the literal devil. They actually have her in a devil costume. She is a temptress. Well, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. This is troubling. I don't feel the need to ever watch another Sylvester Stallone movie in my life, to be perfectly honest. Okay, anyway, let me get back to empathy. Because we don't empathize with Tony, because he is not like us, because we do not treat people that way, we don't care if he succeeds or not. And if we don't care, why bother giving up our precious time? Because time is our most valuable commodity. It's not our money, it's our time. Because, if we spend all of our money this week, guess what? There's more money coming next week. Whatever time we spend this week, we're not getting it back. our time is limited, right? So time is our most valuable commodity. If we don't care about the protagonist, we don't care if he succeeds or not, why would we spend our most precious asset on the movie? Or in the case of us as novelists, why would anyone read your book if they don't care? If it's not worth their while to find out whether the character succeeds or not, right? Melanie, oh my God, I'm running so long. Okay, I want to hit on the other 2 points just quickly. So the second point was the dancing montages. Now, montages are, these are not something that we have access to as novelists. It's not in our toolbox. The closest thing we have is exposition, but I'll go over this quickly because I think any mention, any conversation of Staying Alive needs to kind of talk about these montages. Because one, there's way too many of them. Two, they are way too long. And three, they do not add anything to the story. They got nothing to do with the plot, baby, nothing. If you compare these montages, like whether it's the performance or the auditions or the rehearsals, any of them, compare it to Black Swan, which is also a dance performance story, right? In Black Swan, the dances are integral to the plot. They are integral to the internal journey of the character, but also the external performance story plot. You cannot remove those dance bits in Black Swan without destroying the film. In Staying Alive, all the dance stuff is gratuitous. Like it could all be taken out. It really could. It would not change the story in any way. It's amazing. I mean, it's gratuitous and it's also monotonous. It's like there's no variety in any of it. Like, how many splits does John Travolta do in the air, for heaven's sakes? Right? Like, oh, my merciful Father, and puts up clothes on. Like, oh, anyway. Now, in saying that, there's a couple of scenes where there might be some exceptions. And let me just mention them. One is when Tony is rehearsing the dance with Jackie. But that particular montage is interesting from Jackie's perspective because they're broken up at this point, but she still really loves him. And so through her dance, she is longing for him. But he doesn't care. He doesn't care about her. He doesn't care that he's hurting her. He doesn't care that he's being disrespectful. He's just using her to rehearse so he can get closer to this other missus. Right? Like, Avery and I both were sort of talking to Jackie as the film was going on, saying, God's sake, don't rehearse with him. Are you taking him back? Are you kidding me? Right? It's the absolute opposite of empathy with the protagonist. So that scene, I think, is possibly an exception, but again, it's from Jackie's point of view. It's not even from Tony's point of view. So finally, the movie didn't hold our attention. Now, this is a really big deal, and I could talk for 4 hours at least about it. Don't worry, I won't. But let me just go back to the 4 story questions and genre, because this is really important. If you listen to nothing else, zone in on what I'm about to say. All right, the 4 story questions. Questions 1 and 2 are, who is the protagonist and what does he want? All right, both of these questions have to do with character and character development and character arcs. And character is the most important part of a story, because if we don't care about what the story is, who the story is about, we don't care about what's happening, right? Questions 3 and 4 are, what or who is standing in the way of the protagonist getting what he wants, and what happens if he doesn't get it? Now, these 2 questions are about the plot. Tony is the only person getting in his way, and that has the potential to be really interesting, when it's executed well, but it isn't here. That means that Tony is the antagonist as well as the protagonist. Really interesting storytelling when that happens. At least half of your story, right? And by that I mean half of the plot is driven by the antagonist. That's why the antagonist is so important. That's why it's one of the 4 story questions. The antagonist drives the plot for at least half of your story. This is really important. And the last question is, what happens if they don't get what they want? This is all about stakes. For Tony, there's nothing really at stake. There should be. There is the potential for very high stakes, but it fizzles, right? Or, I mean, fizzles is not the best word because fizzles implies that it started well and then petered out. That's not what happens here. I think maybe stillborn is a better term because there is the potential for high stakes. There is the potential for a big internal arc, but it never, ever gets off the ground. So in those 4 questions, we're dealing with character and plot, right? That's 2 of the 3 key areas that we as writers need to know and to understand for our story to shine. Now, the 3rd key area in this story trinity, if you will, is genre. And Staying Alive is not clear on its genre. You think that it's a dance performance story, right? I mean, that is how it's marketed, and that is how it begins and ends. The first act is all about Tony getting the part in the Broadway show. Like there's all these auditions and all the talk about the show and all that good stuff. The final act is the show. That is exactly what we expect from a performance story. The core event, right? The climax is the performance. And I talked all about the core event in season 14. The problem is that the middle of the story is an obsession love story. The performance storyline is dropped, like it fades way back into the background. Any dancing that's done here serves to support the love story subplot. And that's not how it should be. The subplot, I mean, by its, does what it says on the tin, right? It supports the main plot. At no point should the main plot be subservient or secondary to the subplot. Now, performance stories are crowd pleasers, absolutely, whether they're artistic or sports or business. We love these things. But they're kind of tricky to pull off. And there's a whole lot of different reasons for that. And again, I could talk for hours on it. But suffice it to say that for many reasons, in a performance story, you often need a strong secondary genre and a robust subplot. But you cannot allow either of those things to eclipse your main story. Staying Alive does not have a strong secondary genre, right? Like Tony, he doesn't change. He is who he is. They try to convince us that he has changed. I'm not buying it, Melanie. I'm just not buying it. And the obsession love story in the middle, like I said, that takes over. So in the end, I mean, this is the type of thing that new writers will often do and say that they are writing a genre meld. No, that is not what is happening here. Can you meld genres? Yeah, you can. But wow, that's hard. And that is an extremely high level of craft. For someone to actually innovate a genre to that point, you really got to know what you're doing, because it's very easy to go off track. Often when new writers are saying they're melding genres, they say that because they don't understand enough yet. And I don't say that as a criticism in any way, because we all start wherever we start, right? That's fine. What happens most times is that there is genre confusion. And that's what happens in Staying Alive. It's just a mishmash. It's a bit of performance, a bit of obsession love story, and it doesn't deliver on either of them particularly well. Melanie, I am so far over time. I'm going to stop there. Sorry, I've taken up so much time. How did you go this week? I'm afraid to ask. Are you still talking to me?
I am.
Okay,
now that my eyes have stopped bleeding. And I can actually read the script. Oh, geez, yeah, of course. And I had to remind myself this week quite a lot that this is our What Went Wrong episode. So I shouldn't, so it shouldn't surprise me that a lot of things went wrong. But I did learn a lesson this week, and that was to make sure that I watch the What Went Wrong episode movie 7 days out from recording, just so that I can gather my thoughts and stop bleeding from the eyes. So, but it sometimes, when a movie is this bad, it actually takes a lot of thought to hone in and focus on what do I want, because everything is wrong, or most of it is wrong, and I'll say 99%. So gathering my thoughts is really difficult when we do this, because there are so many things that we could talk about. And, I decided, like you, to pick a couple of things and focus on those. And I did have fun with it too, I have to admit. I did have a bit of fun with this movie this week. So to the point where I actually contemplated calling Tony Tarzan, because that's all I could think about when I was watching the performance scenes at the end. And I'm thinking, you could rename the movie Tarzan and His Plaited Headband Go to Hell. That would be an alternative title. Sorry. But I don't think that would be very fair to Tarzan, to be honest. Anyway, now I really want to stress that I am not a dancer. And the one time that I did go to ballet class, I was asked not to return. So I moved on to liturgical dance and artistic roller skating instead, and everybody was really happy with that. So I might not be the best judge of the performance scenes in this movie, but they did seem awful to me. Now, this might be unfair, or it might just reflect that that's what dancing was like in the 80s. I'm not sure. But the majority of dance scenes, I came to this conclusion pretty quickly, like you did, Valerie, that the dance scenes did not add to the storyline, and they took up an awful lot of time. Now, I think that is indicative of the story's many problems, because the storytelling methods also changed throughout the movie. So the movie was told in dialogue, dance, or attempted to be told in dialogue, dance, and song lyrics, which was really interesting. So as writers, all we have is words. So we have to describe dance and give the impression of music. Now, we can do this because words have sound and rhythm, so we can create music and atmosphere with prose. And we can do this with dialogue, description, and poetic devices. Now, in my opinion, this is the technical art of writing, and it's why I love poetry and why I write poems, because poetry is my way of playing with and understanding words and the effects that they create. And it also helps me create music where I want to in my text or in my prose. So how does this relate to Staying Alive and the way that the story is told? Well, it relates more than you realise. Tony's dialogue and his pronunciation is meant to convey a great deal about his character, right? So he has had a tough upbringing and he is not refined. And we know this by his accent and his word choice. But the problem that he has is that the dialogue is not very good. Now, dialogue in stories is meant to be representative of real language. It gives the illusion of the way people speak, but it is not a literal translation of the way that people talk. Now, if you've ever recorded and then transcribed a conversation, then you'll understand what I mean. Dialogue is very tricky and it's not real. And Valerie and I have discussed covering this in the podcast at some stage, but we've both avoided it because it is very, very difficult to think about movies and transfer that in a way into longer form prose, because movies and plays are mainly dialogue, whereas prose in books and stories is a combination of a lot of things. So it's not always a direct translation, although there is a lot that you could pick up from it. But we have avoided it for a very specific reason, and we're not necessarily convinced that we could do it justice just yet. Now, some of the story in Staying Alive is meant to be told by dance. Now, this is a problem because if this movie was purely a performance dance story about Tony's struggle to become a professional dancer, then it really missed the mark. There's hardly any dancing apart from the beginning in the first half of the movie. And like Valerie said, the first half is focused on Tony, Laura, and the Jackie love triangle. So again, this is a genre problem. This comes down to what type of story were they really trying to tell. And the second half of the movie is mostly about rehearsals and the opening night. Now, the dance scenes are weird. I think they're a weird continuation of the love triangle. And Tony checkmate moves in the performance in the rehearsal is to take the lead role. And that's fascinating from a point of view of what is working and what's not working in the story, because it doesn't work. When Tony makes his move to become the lead in the actual production, it falls flat because at no point did we really know, probably could have guessed, but really did not know that that was his object of desire. And what's at stake for Tony if either he doesn't get that lead or that the performance doesn't go well? The only thing that felt like it was at stake was his fragile ego and the potential to tear his black lycra dance pants. I thought that was the biggest stake in the second half of the movie was, are his pants going to split? This is me this is what I was trying to do when I was watching this movie, was think of interesting things that might happen that didn't. But that is another sign, right? That was a sign of thinking about tension, and I have covered tension in a couple of series ago. So there was very little tension in this movie. And when I say that, what I mean is that I was not really anticipating anything with the performance. In fact, the only anticipation I felt was involving Jackie. And it was all to do with whether or not she was going to take him back. And I, like Valerie and Avery, really hoped that she didn't, but, she did. And at that point, when she does, I thought, well, how is he going to mess this up again? What is he going to do to her again? And how is he going to trample all over her heart? And he does. So he's a moron, and he kisses Laura mid-performance in the final thing. I don't know why he does that. I assume it's because he can get, there are no consequences for him. I just he's lucky that all he got was a slap in the face, really. But anyway, that whole performance part and how that was all done. And if you added on the music, not only did my eyes bleed, but then my ears started to bleed as well, because that music in the performance was so grating. And I love 80s music. So I am a child of the 80s. I love 80s music, and that just killed me. That the dance, fire. Anyway, it was awful. If I ever hear it again, I'll fall over in the street. Anyway, right, action scenes. They are very difficult to write, including dance scenes. And I'm speaking from personal experience because my story is a performance story. The novel that I'm writing is a performance story. And I had to really, really think about how to write the action scenes in my story. And it took me hours and days and months to work it out. So they are really hard to write. But when they are done well, they are excellent, and they should be the most exciting scenes in your story. Now, if you are writing dance scenes or any action scenes, not only do you need to describe the action in a way that makes sense to the reader, and so they can follow what's happening, you also need to have the other elements of storytelling in those scenes because that is what's going to make it compelling to read. So some of those elements are that you need to have a clear idea about how the scene could get the protagonist closer or further away from their object of desire, and a clear idea about what can go wrong in the scene. And you need to make sure that things do go wrong, right? And that focuses on the forces of antagonism. So those things that I just mentioned go back to Valerie's four core questions. All right. Now, back in episode 2 of this season, when we studied Rogue Nation, I broke down how an excellent action scene started, what the objects of desire were, how the stakes were raised, how dramatic irony increased tension, and culminated in a seemingly impossible choice for Ethan Hunt, who was the protagonist in that story. Now, none of those story elements were in Staying Alive dance scenes because there was nothing at stake for Tony. All right, let's move on to storytelling via song lyrics. Now, there are a few scenes where Jackie is singing with her band in a bar, and when Tony walks in, she always seemed to be singing a song that tells him how she feels or describes their ill-fated love affair. So, lucky Jackie and Tony, I suppose. Their timing was good. Now, while the lyrics are telling the story, and they were telling the story, and they were telling Tony about how Jackie was feeling, it is really boring to watch someone sing at another person when all that other person is doing is listening. It understood what the storytellers were trying to do, but I don't think it worked very well in execution because really we were just watching one person sing at another person. Now, telling a story via different methods is rich in written stories. We as writers can do this in our stories via letters, poems, emails, text messages, etc. And I recently reread a novel that is set in modern times but has letters from the First World War in between chapters. So this method was used to tell backstory and also provide clues to the present day story. Now, I have also written ballad lyrics with rhyme and longer meter in a scene as a metaphor, or I've used that technique as lullabies in my short stories. So this was a really interesting point this week because while seeing it in a visual storytelling format, so seeing how the lyrics were meant to be telling the story, thinking about that in a written form, we have a lot more opportunity to use those different forms of writing to tell our stories. And I thought that was really worthwhile pointing out. Now, when I say visual storytelling, I'm talking about movies, but lyrics are used to tell stories, especially in theatrical musicals. That's a really obvious example of how to use songs to tell a story. But Staying Alive isn't a musical. So I felt like I just felt so confused, really, is by what the storytellers were doing. I think they were trying to be artistic, but I just don't necessarily think that happened. So the balance between dialogue, dancing, and lyrics to tell this story adds to the overall impression that the movie doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it a romance? Is it a performance? Is it a musical? And do we care? No, I don't think we did. Well, I didn't by the end. And this brings me to the final points that I want to make. And these are Tony as a character, Laura as the antagonist, the progressive complications, and the biggest mystery in the movie. All right. So Tony, like Valerie, I did not empathize with him at all. The way he treats Jackie and the lack of stakes made him uninteresting. And when he's under pressure, he acts like a petulant child. And remember that when a character is revealed when someone is under pressure. And then there's Laura. She is meant to be, I think, Tony's primary force of antagonism, but we don't know what Laura wants. I think she wants to dance and be the center of attention, but not knowing actually is a problem because the forces of antagonism should challenge the protagonist to rise to the occasion and improve. But when the force of antagonism's object of desire isn't clear, it means or results in no challenge for the protagonist. Now, the other problem with Laura is that actually Tony's biggest challenge, like Valerie said, is himself. So she is a weak antagonist and a really odd love interest because neither Laura or Tony are compelling characters. And again, this is because they don't have any motivation beyond the performance, and there's nothing at stake for either of them. And now for the complications. The same complication repeats itself throughout the movie, and it has little to do with the dancing. It's a love triangle. All of the complications center around the love triangle, and Laura and Tony hash it out at Jackie's expense. And this repeats continuously. So it's the same complication, and repeated complications with the same outcomes make for boring reading and watching. So the lesson is to make sure that your complications don't repeat. Now, to my final point, Tony's solo. That was a gutsy move in the performance scene, and I don't mean that in a good way. What was Tony trying to prove, and who was he trying to prove it to? We don't know. And really, by this stage, I don't care. And it was just more, it just made me, A, not like him, and B, not empathize with him. It just increased those emotions that I had even more, which was pretty impressive. But the performance did provide the biggest mystery in this movie, which was, where did Tony's pants go? I have no idea why at the beginning he started with pants and then ended up with no pants. Anyway, thank goodness that's over. Thank goodness.
Melanie. oh my God. But listen, there were stakes for Jackie, right? She was the only character, again, with stakes.
Yeah, she was
by far the most compelling character.
Most interesting character. Yeah.
By a New York mile.
Absolutely.
All right.
What's the bottom line for you this week?
Other than I'm never watching a Sylvester Stallone movie again?
Yeah.
All right. So the bottom line here is focus on, the story trinity, which is your character, your plot, and the genre. If you get these things right, your story's going to work, and it's going to work well. But get them wrong, and you might very well be facing a page one rewrite. And if you don't bother to do the rewrite and you decide to publish your book anyway, you're going to be facing a lot of one-star reviews, or in the case of Staying Alive, a 0% rating. Melanie, what is the bottom line for you?
All right. I think very simply, this movie really illustrated to me how important empathy is. And watching or reading about a character that you can't empathize with is extremely difficult. So it really brought home how important it is to create empathy. And like you said, it's not about likability. It's about seeing parts of, or seeing the logic and understanding why a character is doing what they're doing. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this week. Thank goodness. We'd love to know what you think of the What Went Wrong episodes. And of course, if there's a film you would like us to take a look at, feel free to reach out to us via email or social media and put a request in. Next week, we have our What Went Right episode, so come and join us as we discuss Outrun. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For more information about our online training, visit storynerd.ca/courses. To join Valerie's Inner Circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And for my tips for books to help you read like a writer, visit me at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.